My son Jason Ward stood up at the family dinner in Seattle and said to me, loud enough for the chandelier to hear, "Mom, you're too old to handle money." It felt like the room cracked in half. My wine glass wavered, then clinked on the plate. The chatter hushed, but only for a heartbeat. Then laughter rippled across the table. Phones came up, shutters clicking, little bright rectangles pointed in my face. Brooke, his wife, smiled and taped it, no concern in her eyes, because she already knew the moment. Hashtag finances are for the young, she typed with precision, sending it into the shared group thread. She wanted it immortalized. I sat frozen, halfway between spoon and lips. The salmon glazed in butter sauce slid off the fork, splashing the creamy risotto below. I kept my eyes locked on Jason's face, his mouth firm, his eyes glinting with triumph. I didn't dare speak. Couldn't. The air felt thick, like someone had locked the door on my voice. Then Brooke, the graceful volunteer in every family wore, slid over a glossy brochure, soft pastel covers, smiling retirees, tropical flora, watercolor classes, aesthetic swimming pools. "Mom," she said in a tone that pretended to be kind, "we thought you'd like to look at these places. Nice, relaxing retirement homes." I stared at the paper. She said, with community gardens, art therapy, social clubs. "We found a few you might enjoy." Translation: disappear with dignity. I looked up at Jason. He didn't shift in his seat. The same face I had seen when I taught him to ride a bike, helped him with geometry, kissed scrapes on his knees. That face now turned to me, hard like stone. "You were never meant to manage, Mom. That's why we made the plans." My heart hammered, but my face felt numb. I tasted bile, not wine, and swallowed hard. 2 hours later, I won't lie, I was standing outside a roadside motel, midnight, gas station glow, cigarette smoke curling in the distance, not mine. I had a single suitcase, a box of keepsakes, and 2 dresses, the ones I hadn't thrown away yet. The clerk at the counter looked at me like I was transient driftwood. I was. $59 a night. Thin towels, thinner pity. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, at the brownish water stains, spider web cracks over the lamp. The lights flickered. I turned my head and saw the edge of a mirror reflecting the motel sign in the window. Vacancy. It felt like shrapnel. I was the one vacated. I replayed 41 years with Mark, the holidays, the births, the hospitals, the quiet after storms. The nights I lay awake while he snored gently or coughed, the mornings when I made him breakfast and drove him to work. The bills that always got paid. His papers, his meetings, his calm voice in arguments. And me, always beside him, always supportive, always quietly steady. I had believed that was enough. Jason insisted that the will gave him everything: the house, the accounts, the assets, the power of attorney. "You were just the wife," he said. Just the wife. Just an afterthought. The words slammed through me like a verdict. Was I just that? After all those years? After all those sacrifices? But Mark hadn't been cruel. Not in his heart. He had been fastidious, methodical, sometimes harsh in his corrections, in his expectations, but never cruel. He had a careful hand, a clear mind. He doted on me in his odd way, the silent pat on the back, the extra blanket when winter crept in, the flowers on anniversaries. If Jason was telling the truth, then the man who whispered "I love you" into my hair had turned me into a charity appeal. I didn't believe Jason. I couldn't. The first time he mentioned the will, Mark had responded, "I will show you, Ellie, when the time is right. You'll know as much as I know." Weeks before his collapse, he sat me down at that same oak kitchen table where we had made so many decisions. He slid documents across the table. "If anything ever happens," he said gravely, "Alan has all the originals. You'll be safe." He held my hand as he said it. I felt secure. He looked me in the eyes. He wasn't a man of soft words, but that moment was soft. Tender. If Jason had shredded that trust, he had cut his father's pledge as well. The thought made my spine cold. I spent the night in sleepless vigil. The motel's thin walls let in distant honks, whispers of travelers, muffled televisions. I tucked my knees to my chest, the box of keepsakes beside me. I turned over every conversation with Mark, every detail, every odd pause when he'd glance at a file folder or tap his pen. Did I miss something? A hidden amendment? A last-minute codicil? A conversation between Jason and Alan I didn't hear? The doubt sat heavy in my chest. At dawn, I forced myself to rise. I dressed in the clothes I brought. I collected the box of keepsakes, photos, letters, the gold watch Mark gave me in our first year, a pressed orchid from our anniversary, and I packed them neatly. I looked in the mirror. My eyes looked older than I felt, streaked with ache and betrayal. I hailed a taxi. On the ride to Alan Pierce's office, I stared at the gray early dawn, Seattle's skyline dim behind clouds. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would demand the truth. The driver asked if I was okay. I nodded yes, but I wasn't. Alan's office was old wood, leather chairs, tall windows. The kind of place Mark had loved. When I walked in, Alan looked up surprised. Ellie? I called you 4 times. He frowned, adjusting his glasses. Jason told you I was traveling, I said. My voice trembled but held. I never left town. He shut the door, motioned me to a chair. I sat and waited, choking down fear. He opened a thick manila folder, full of tabbed documents, signatures, endorsements, typed pages, legalese. His voice was measured. He read, "To my beloved wife Eleanor Ward, 65% of all real property, securities, accounts, holdings, patents, investments, personally held and corporate interests, comments, income, residuals, royalties, liabilities, etc. To be held in her name after my death, and only in the event that our son Jason Ward treats her with respect, dignity, and offers her full cooperation following my death, will he receive $6 million in trust, subject to forfeiture upon breach of said condition." He turned the pages. We both felt the silence between sentences. Each line pressed harder than the one before. I closed my eyes, tasting the gravity of it. The clause stood out like a flourish, contingent upon treating his mother with respect after the testator's death. In effect, an enforceable moral standard. Alan cleared his throat. Jason knew this. He's known for years. His gaze flickered. The only changes Mark made in the last update involved small clarifications, none altering the distribution. That clause was always there. I swallowed. The room felt too tight. The lights flickered. The weight of 41 years pressed onto me. I whispered then, he lied. Alan nodded. He concealed the reading. He asserted false claims. That is fraud. Misrepresentation. Elder abuse. We have grounds. We'll file for immediate injunctions. Freeze assets. Block transfers. My hand shook. I remembered the dinner table, the laughter, the phone cameras. I remembered my slip in the motel, the vacancy. No, I said softly, then firmer. No more running. No more being made to vanish. I rose. The folder felt too heavy for him to carry. I stood in that office, my legs unsteady, but my heart resolute. Alan made calls. The banks flag accounts. Brokerage firms suspend trading. Registries freeze titles. By noon, courts were petitioned, restraining orders drafted. Jason's cards declined. His name removed from powers of attorney he never had. He sat stunned, locked out of the system he assumed he owned. At 3:19 p.m., my phone rang. I held it steady. "Mom," Jason said. His voice was brittle, like ice cracking. "Something's wrong with the bank. My cards don't work." I replied gently, "I'm at Alan's. We're reviewing the real will." Silence. Then, "You're confused. You're upset. This is all too sudden." I closed my eyes. Felt my breath steady. "No, Jason. What's sudden is you betraying the man you claim to honor. What's sudden is every step you're trying to take that you have no legal right to take. You want money? You want control? Then fulfill your condition. Treat me with respect. Prove you've earned your trust. Because until then, nothing, not a house, not a bank account, belongs to you alone." He hung up. I turned to Alan. He offered me water. I shook my head. The room was still. The battle had big asterisk N. I collected my box. I left Alan's office with the folder clutched to my chest. The world outside felt colder, but at least it felt sharp. I was no longer someone's forgotten ornament. I was someone demanding reckoning. The cab ride from Alan's office to the bank was short, but I felt every bump like it echoed through my bones. The folder sat in my lap like a relic of another life. Mark's life. My life. A life Jason had tried to edit, erase, control. But now the paper in my hands was heavier than any lie he could spin. At the bank, the assistant manager met me with tight lips and an apologetic shrug. "Mrs. Ward," she said, "your son came in last week and told us you were no longer mentally sound." He had papers, fake, we now understand, that gave him limited authority. He forged them, I said simply. He forged them, and he threw me out of my house. Her cheeks colored. "I'm so sorry." I nodded. "Lock him out. No transactions. No exceptions. And I want everything re-verified with my lawyer." She gave me a form. I signed. It felt like chiseling my name into stone. Back at Alan's, he was waiting. "3 accounts frozen," he said. "We're working on the 4th. Brokerage firms are stalling, but we'll press. You want to take this to court?" I paused. "Yes, but I want to know the whole picture first." Alan understood. "Operation Order," he said. It sounded like a military strike. It felt like one. We started with phone logs. Jason had called Alan's office 3 times the week after Mark's death, pretending to be me. "Ellie says she's grieving and doesn't want to deal with the will," he'd said. "She gave me permission to handle it." There were voice recordings. Alan's assistant had saved them. "He mimicked your cadence," she said. But it didn't feel right. It wasn't. Next came Mark's notes, his handwriting, precise and severe. Dated. Annotated. He had left no room for ambiguity. He had even included a personal statement. If Jason fails to uphold his responsibilities, he forfeits all privileges. No exceptions. Love without honor is theft. My hand trembled as I read it. That was Mark. Severe. Principled. Unyielding. But always clear. And Jason, our son, had gambled that grief would silence me. That old age meant weakness. That my silence was consent. He didn't know me at all. At 3:19 p.m., as if scripted, my phone buzzed again. "Mom," Jason's voice was thinner now, more plastic. "The banks are glitching." I said nothing for a moment. Then, "I'm at Pierce's office." Silence. "We're listening to the real will. The one where your name sits under trust fund. Not ownership. Not executor. Not power of attorney. Just a condition, contingent upon respect." He tried to pivot. "You're grieving. You're confused. This isn't a good time for big decisions." "No," I said. "This is the perfect time. Because I've never been clearer." He sighed. "I was trying to help. You put me in a motel." His voice turned brittle. "You left." "No. I was pushed. But I'm walking back now." Alan ended the call. "That's evidence," he said. "Save the audio. We'll log it." By 5, we had revoked every form of power Jason tried to claim. He no longer had access to Mark's estate. No legal standing. No cards that worked. His financial footprint was erased in real time. That night, I checked into a boutique hotel in Fremont. It wasn't much, a room with a balcony, clean sheets, the smell of lemon polish, but it felt like a fortress. I ordered soup from the diner downstairs. Ate with both hands steady. I slept 8 hours without waking once. The next morning, Detective Ramirez called. We pulled Jason's version of the will. It was printed at a commercial press, not a home printer. And not recent. He had it prepared while Mark was in the hospital. I closed my eyes. He planned this before his father died? Ramirez was quiet. It wasn't opportunistic. It was structured. He timed the announcement. He printed it through Brooke's firm. Her name is on the order. I felt my jaw tighten. Brooke, smiling, polished, always gracious in public. She had known. She had helped. That afternoon, Ramirez visited Alan's office. She brought the fake documents Jason had distributed, one to the bank, one to the registrar's office, one to the HOA of our neighborhood. They all carry a signature similar to Mark's, but we have verification he was hospitalized that day and heavily sedated. Forgery, I said aloud to hear it. Ramirez nodded. Felony. State and federal. We filed official complaints. Elder abuse. Will tampering. Identity fraud. Coercion. Forgery. Misrepresentation. Each form I signed felt like a quiet resurrection. At 6:42 p.m., Jason called again. I answered. Mom, he said, calmer now. Let's not do this. You wouldn't press charges on your own son. I opened the file on my lap. Took a photo of the will clause, the one that said respect is the condition. I already did, I replied. He laughed nervously. That's just paper. No, I said. It's the law. He paused. Then, I'll fight it. You'll lose. That call from the motel? Where you said I was too old. That's recorded. That dinner where you announced the takeover? Half the room had their phones out. His voice snapped. You're turning this into a war. I let the silence answer. That night, I went back to the same Fremont diner. Sat by the window. Ordered soup again. This time I added bread. A waitress complimented my scarf. I thanked her. I stared at my reflection in the window and didn't look away. Fear had left the room. In its place came something colder. Sharper. Infinitely steadier. The next morning, Alan sent over an itemized list of all financial transfers Jason had initiated in the last 3 months. Over $120,000 moved into a new account, one I had never seen. A shell company. I forwarded it to Ramirez. 2 hours later, she called back. Brooke is listed as the legal advisor. Of course she was. By lunch, Jason's brokerage accounts were frozen. Pending investigation. Brooke's firm was served a notice of fraud inquiry. The estate was now under protective oversight. Jason texted, "This is spiraling." I replied, "You lit the match." That evening, Alan called me as I sat on the hotel bed folding laundry. "Ellie," he said, "we're filing a civil suit in parallel. Recovery of fraudulently moved assets. Jason will be deposed." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "I want the truth on record." Alan paused. "This isn't just about money, is it?" "No," I said. "This is about legacy. About dignity." He didn't argue. That night, I opened Mark's watch case. Black leather, velvet lining. His handwriting was still tucked inside, a note from 1984. To Ellie, for every second you held us together. I held it to my chest. Not to weep, but to remember. Jason had tried to erase me, but I was the ink that wrote the page. Detective Ramirez leaned back in the worn leather chair of Alan's office, flipping through Jason's so-called documents like she was peeling back layers of rot. "Not homemade," she muttered, eyebrows drawing into a tight line. "These were printed professionally. High-grade stock. Watermarked. You don't get this kind of paper unless you're preparing a real document or trying to fake one." My stomach twisted. I watched her gloved hands fan through the stack. Jason's fake will, letters he'd signed pretending to be my legal guardian, papers authorizing transactions he had no right to touch. The ink wasn't even dry on some of them. He hadn't hesitated. He had planned this for months, maybe years. "See this logo," she said, pointing to a faint emblem in the corner of one page. "It's Brooke's firm. And that," she flipped to the invoice paper-clipped behind it, "is a billing record for legal advisory services. The account's under Jason's name, but it was paid for by a corporate card registered to Brooke." My fingers clenched around the arm of the chair. Brooke, the woman who once asked me for advice on where to get her wedding dress altered, who sent me fake smiles over wine, who kissed me on the cheek on Mother's Day. Brooke, who now sat behind Jason's con, steadying his hand as he forged his father's signature. "They planned this," I said. The words tasted bitter. Ramirez nodded. "With precision. This wasn't impulsive. They weren't just waiting for Mark to die, they were preparing for it like it was a business acquisition." A chill settled into the base of my spine. By evening, the freeze extended to brokerage accounts. Ramirez had moved fast. Jason's trades were halted, transfers rejected, credit cards locked. His empire of entitlement, built on false signatures and whispered schemes, was crumbling. At 8:07 p.m., he called again. I let it ring until the 6th tone. Then I picked up. Mom, he said, the words smooth, as if this was a normal Tuesday. There's been some kind of mistake. I think the legal team overreacted. No, I said. My voice didn't tremble. They reacted. The mistake was yours. You wouldn't press charges on your own son, he said, softer this time, as though begging. I reached into the folder on the table beside me, snapped a photo of the trust clause Mark had written in his own sharp, unmistakable handwriting, contingent upon respect, cooperation, and ethical conduct toward his surviving mother. Breach of this clause results in forfeiture. I sent the image. Jason was silent for a long beat. Then he said, that's just paper. I'll fight it. You'll lose, I said. And you know why? Because everything is recorded. The dinner where you told me I was too old. The call from the motel. Every bank transaction, every forged form. And the woman who printed your fake will left a digital trail as bright as neon. He tried to sound stern. You're being vindictive. No, I said. I'm being precise. His voice rose slightly. You've never cared about any of this. Dad always handled the finances. Exactly, I said. And Dad left it all to me. I hung up. That was the last call I ever answered from Jason without legal representation. The next morning, I filed a motion to revoke Jason's eligibility for his trust. It wasn't symbolic, it was strategic. The clause Mark wrote wasn't just language. It had teeth. Legal teeth. Alan sat across from me with an affidavit ready to be signed. You understand, he said, if we execute this, Jason loses everything. He can fight it in probate court, but we have the original will, digital logs, and evidence of elder coercion. I took the pen. Signed. Felt the ink bleed into the paper like an exhale. Mark had given me this power. Now I would use it. Alan pressed his hands together. We'll file it today. Jason's lawyers won't have time to prepare before the freeze order expands. He'll be locked out of the trust within 48 hours. At lunch, I walked to the cafe across from the courthouse and ate alone, chicken salad, a lemon tart, a cup of bitter coffee. It was the first real meal I had taken without a knot in my stomach since the night they shoved me out of my own house. I stared out the window. I didn't cry. There were no tears left, just silence, thick as velvet. That evening, Ramirez called again. We've issued a subpoena for Brooks' firm's billing records. She tried to erase some of the files, but we pulled backups from their server host. It's all there. The invoice for probate advisory, printed 5 days after Mark's death. They moved fast. Too fast. She paused. You were supposed to be weak. That's what they counted on. They were wrong, I said. She didn't argue. By the following morning, Jason's bailiff received notice of the trust's suspension. The letter was short, precise, brutal. To Mr. Jason Ward. This letter confirms the temporary suspension of all access and claims to the Mark Ward Trust. Your eligibility has been nullified, pending review of violations to Article 3, Clause D, ethical treatment and preservation of the well-being of the surviving spouse. Respectfully, the Office of Estate Protection. Jason's lawyer called Alan the next hour. There's been a misunderstanding, he said. We'd like to discuss a resolution. There is no misunderstanding, Alan replied. There is only evidence. When the call ended, Alan turned to me. We're going to win. I didn't smile. Winning wasn't the goal. Winning was the minimum. That afternoon, I returned home, not the motel, not the hotel. Home. The house Mark and I had built on Westlake Avenue. A place filled with 41 years of furniture, dust, scars, memories. But when I opened the master bedroom door, it felt like a stranger's lair. Brooks' dresses were still hanging on my closet rod. Designer bags lined the shelves. Jason's cufflinks sat on the nightstand where Mark's watch used to be. There were wine glasses by the bathtub. A dog-eared real estate magazine on the floor beside the dresser. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed a stack of garbage bags and began packing everything. Each silk blouse, every bottle of overpriced perfume, every shoe with a red sole, they all went into bags. The drawers Jason had claimed were emptied. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I cleaned with the discipline of a soldier. Mark's study, the one Jason wanted to convert into a wine cellar, was still intact. I stepped in, closed the door, and stared at the bookshelves, the old leather chair, the globe he used to spin when thinking. It would become a studio now. For me. For my life. For the life I still had. Alan called again. Jason's bail is set at $75,000. I blinked. He's under arrest? This morning. Fraud. Coercion. Elder abuse. He made a joke at a steakhouse about toxic family assets. Someone recorded it. Poetic justice. Served rare. I looked out the window. The garden was overgrown, but the fountain still worked. The wind blew through the pine trees like it had for decades. My phone buzzed. A text from Brooke. Think of the grandchildren. Don't drag this into court. I stared at the message for a long time. And then I wrote back. I'm thinking about the example I owe them. I turned off my phone. And I opened every window in the house. Let the air back in. Let the rot go out. They arrested Jason at 6:42 p.m. in a steakhouse in Bellevue. Mid-bite, mid-joke, mid-life. He was holding a crystal tumbler of bourbon and laughing with a colleague about toxic family assets. That phrase, toxic family assets, came back to haunt him as the arrest report's title. Two plainclothes officers approached his booth while the waiter was serving creme brulee. One tapped his shoulder, showed a badge, and said, "Mr. Ward, please stand." Jason looked confused, then annoyed, then arrogant. "I'm in the middle of dinner." "We're aware. This won't take long." "Do you know who I am?" he asked. "We do," the officer replied. "And that's exactly why we're here." Jason was cuffed before the spoon hit the custard. His friend sat frozen. The waiter backed away like he'd just seen a ghost. Brooke wasn't with him. She was at a gallery opening, playing the role of supportive wife while her husband was being taken out like yesterday's scandal. The next morning, the news hit the internet like wildfire. Seattle Sun arrested in elder fraud case, $11 million at stake. The photo they used was cruel and perfect. Jason mid-yell, veins visible, hair a mess, cuffed hands behind his back, being led toward a patrol car while still wearing his tailored charcoal suit. I watched it all unfold from the front porch of my home. My home. Not a motel, not a hotel, not a borrowed room. My porch. Coffee in hand. Slippers on. Calm as the sea before the tide pulls the world under. Brooke arrived later that afternoon in a black SUV. Her walk was still elegant, but her composure cracked at the edges. I let her in without speaking. She followed me to the living room like a woman heading toward her own cross. She glanced at the empty fireplace mantel Mark's photo used to sit there, and then she turned to me. "This is insane," she said. "Jason is being made into a villain." I said nothing. She paced, arms folded. "It's a misunderstanding, Ellie. You know how he is. He overreacts, he rushes things. But he's not malicious. Forging a will is malicious." Her eyes flicked toward the ceiling. "He thought he was protecting the family." "No," I said. "He was protecting his access to money." Brooke exhaled sharply. "This is not how it was supposed to go." That made me laugh. "What was the plan? You take over the house? Remodel? Sell Mark's antique collection to furnish your wine room? Turn my life into an accessory for your lifestyle blog?" Her mouth opened, but no sound came. I continued calmly. "Your bags are in the foyer. The house has been returned to its rightful owner. You have until sundown to leave." "Ellie," she said. "We have kids." "Yes. And I'll remember that when I'm asked to testify." Brooke's hands shook slightly as she picked up her phone. She texted someone. I assumed it was her lawyer. Or her mother. Maybe both. By 5 o'clock, the SUV was gone. My house was silent again. That night, I walked through the rooms slowly. Mark's study smelled like cedar and ink. His old typewriter still sat on the desk. I opened the drawer and found the yellow legal pad where he used to jot random ideas. The last line on the page read, "Legacy is not inheritance. It's integrity." I slept for the first time in our bed since his death. The sheets were fresh. The pillow still held his scent faint, but there. I wrapped myself in the silence. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It felt like peace. The next morning, Alan called. Jason's bail hearing was this morning. And? Set at $75,000. He has no liquid assets. All accounts frozen. Brooks' personal funds are under review due to joint activity. Will he sit in jail? For now. I nodded. Good. Reporters started calling. Email inquiries, text messages from unfamiliar numbers, camera crews circling the block. I refused all interviews. Not yet. Not until the dust settled. Alan called again. We found a second set of documents. My heart skipped. Where? In a storage unit Jason rented. More forged wills. Draft versions. Variants. He had backup lies. Yes. With timestamps. Predating Mark's death. And Brooke. Her fingerprints are on the planning documents. She's exposed. That evening, I packed every last remnant of their presence into heavy-duty trash bags. The closet. The guest room. The kitchen drawers where she'd stashed detox tea and essential oils. Gone. I bleached the sink. I replaced every towel. I lit candles and played jazz and cleaned until the house breathed again. At midnight, I received an email. From Brooke Haysward. Subject, please. Body, we need to talk. You're being vindictive. Think of the grandchildren. There's still time to fix this. You don't have to destroy him. I didn't reply, but I saved the email. At dawn, I walked through the garden Mark planted years ago. His tomatoes had overgrown the bed. The rosemary bush had turned wild. I pulled weeds and clipped dead branches. My hands hurt, but I didn't stop. Each pull was a reclamation. Later that morning, I met Alan at the courthouse. He handed me a file. Inside, sworn affidavits, forensic accounting reports, digital signatures, server logs. A roadmap of betrayal. A diagram of Jason's ambition. Alan's voice was quiet. We can press for full revocation of his inheritance. Not just the trust. Everything. And Brooke. If she's charged, the prenuptial clause activates. She walks away with nothing. Then press. He closed the file. Ellie, are you sure? I met his eyes. They built this. I'm just finishing it. That afternoon, I changed the locks on the house. Again. Not for security, just symbolism. A clean threshold. No remnants. By week's end, subpoenas were issued. Brooke's firm distanced themselves. Her mother went silent. Jason's friends evaporated. Their social accounts disappeared. Their lives had revolved around optics. Now, the optics were rot. A neighbor passed me on the street. She paused, tentative. I saw the news, she said. I had no idea. I did, I said softly. Eventually. She squeezed my arm. We're all with you. I walked home in silence. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. You were just the wife. Remember when I said that? I was wrong. I'm sorry. Jason. I deleted it. In the living room, Mark's photo sat on the mantel again. Not a shrine. A statement. This was my house. This was my name. This was the end of his story, and the beginning of mine. She arrived uninvited, unannounced, and unmistakably armed, not with *P*NS, but with perfume, pearls, and poison stitched into every syllable of her voice. Diana Hayes. Brooke's mother. She swept through the gate like a diplomat visiting hostile territory, wearing a white cashmere shawl like armor and a smile that never reached her eyes. She had always been polite to me. Polished. Polite. Passive-aggressive in a way that passed for refinement in certain social circles. But today, she came to negotiate. I opened the door. She didn't wait for an invitation. Ellie, she said sweetly. I thought we could talk. Woman to woman. Mother to mother. I let her in without a word, because you don't let someone like Diana stand on your porch, she'll make a scene. And she didn't come for tea. She came for leverage. She sat on the couch as if it belonged to her and crossed her legs delicately, adjusting a ring that glittered like a bribe. I want to avoid dragging this family through more scandal, she began. We all know the media loves a tragic widow, but eventually, they'll find the dirt. Are you here to threaten me? I asked calmly. Her smile remained. To offer you relief. She opened her designer handbag and pulled out an envelope. $1. $5 million, she said, placing it on the coffee table. In exchange for withdrawing charges. Dropping the civil suit. allowing Jason to access a modest trust under supervision. I didn't touch the envelope. Modest, I repeated. That's what you call inheritance manipulation and felony forgery? She sighed, feigning pity. Let's be adults. Mistakes were made. But this doesn't have to escalate. I leaned forward. It already has. Diana's tone cooled. For million, she said. That's final. Tax-free. Discreet. No lawyers. No reporters. I stared at her for a long moment. Then I asked, what do you know about Mark's business? Her pupils flickered. She tilted her head. Pardon. I think you're not here for Jason, I said slowly. You're here because Brooke's name is on invoices connected to shell companies. You're worried this won't stop at forgery. You're worried it'll touch Mark. And your family. And your legacy. Diana's eyes narrowed. Be careful, Eleanor. We know things. About Mark. Things that could change how people remember him. There it was. Not advice. A threat. I stood. Walked to the window. Watched the neighbor's dog chase birds in the yard. Calmly, I replied, then let's find out together. That night, I called Caroline Chin, a forensic accountant Mark once trusted during a messy patent dispute. She owed me a favor. We met the next morning at Alan's office. She wore dark glasses and a sharp bun. Her voice was fast, her fingers faster. We're digging into 12 years of records, she said. Starting with the shell accounts. I need passwords, email access, server backups. I gave her everything. Within hours, we uncovered a pattern. Mark had moved money through consulting firms that didn't exist, companies with names like Arcturus Holdings and Pacific Insight Group. There were invoices billed for services that were never rendered. Dates that didn't match. Digital signatures that looked strategic. Caroline frowned as she reviewed a stack of flagged reports. This isn't ordinary tax shielding. These look like pass-through entities used to stage laundering operations. But here's the thing. She tapped the screen. Every transaction was mirrored by an internal memo. He documented everything. It's as if he knew someone would come looking. My throat tightened. Are you saying Mark was involved in laundering? She shook her head. No. I'm saying he was documenting it. We spent 6 hours combing through spreadsheets, email printouts, bank logs. One phrase kept appearing, for review by agency. Which agency? I asked. Caroline leaned back. Only one way to find out. That evening, I called Ramirez and asked to be connected to a federal contact. She hesitated, but Alan intervened. Within 24 hours, I was sitting in a federal building downtown, across from Agent Sarah Martinez, who looked like she hadn't blinked in 5 years. You realize, she said after I laid it out, that by handing this over, you're potentially implicating your husband in federal crimes. I nodded. And you'd rather lose the money than keep the secret? I'd rather lose everything, I said, than live a lie built on someone else's sins. She stared at me for a long time. Would you be willing to wear a wire? She asked. Yes, I said. It was the calmest yes I've ever spoken. The plan was simple. Diana wanted a deal. Jason and Brooke would return to bargain. The terms were clear, money in exchange for silence. What they didn't know was that my house was already wired, and Agent Martinez would be across the street with surveillance. We set the trap. They came in like salespeople trying to charm a client out of a bad review. Jason wore a suit. Brooke wore an apology. Diana wore a smirk. Clean assets, Jason began. $3 million in a protected account. The house stays yours. In exchange, no lawsuits, no press. Brooke added, we'll even draft a public letter of apology. I smiled politely. And what about the forged wills? Jason's smile faltered. We'll take full responsibility. I leaned in. And the offshore accounts? Silence. I opened a folder and slid it across the table. Photos. Invoices. Contracts. The memo with for review by agency written in Mark's own hand. Brooke paled. Jason's jaw clenched. Diana's voice broke the silence. You don't want to expose Mark. Not your husband. I looked directly at Jason. When did you find out about his dirty funds? Before or after you forged the will? He didn't answer. That's when Martinez stepped in. 3 agents entered. Badges out. Jason Ward, Brooke Hayesward, Diana Hayes, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, obstruction of justice, and attempted extortion. Brooke burst into tears. Jason tried to grab the folder. Two agents grabbed his arms. You don't understand, he said desperately. Dad worked with dangerous people. You've put yourself at risk. Agent Martinez stepped forward. Was that a threat to a federal witness? Jason froze. Another charge added. Diana hissed, you'll regret this. No, I said. But you might? As they were led out, Agent Martinez turned to me. There's something else, she said. About Mark. She handed me a sealed document. He wasn't dirty. He was deep cover. 12 years as a federal informant. Those companies? That money? Sanctioned accounts. Used to build a case against laundering rings. He documented everything so someone like you could finish what he started. My legs gave out. I sat slowly. You're telling me he was working with the government? She nodded. Which means everything you inherited is clean. I looked at the folder, then at the empty room. Jason's nuclear P*N, the secret he'd hoped would destroy me, had detonated in his own hands. The irony was surgical. He tried to use my husband's secrets to blackmail me. But those secrets were actually proof of his father's integrity. The morning after the arrests, my house was silent. Not the silence of absence, but of aftermath, thick, electric, waiting to decide whether it was peace or pause. I stood in the kitchen with Mark's old mug in my hands, the one that read "Trust is earned," chipped on the handle. The irony hadn't aged a day. Agent Martinez called at 9:02 a.m. We need a full debrief, she said. You're in the middle of a high-profile takedown. There will be blowback. Let them come, I said. I've got more to lose staying quiet. The federal building was colder than I remembered. Gray hallways. Closed doors. Voices behind glass. Martinez walked me to a windowless room and gestured for me to sit. She didn't smile. She respected me too much for that. This won't be easy, she said. We're talking about national cases. Mark's files are part of an ongoing investigation that stretches into offshore fraud, shell corporations, political donors, and real estate laundering. You're technically a beneficiary of those funds, even if they were clean by design. I'm not here to protect money, I replied. I'm here to finish what he started. She studied me for a moment. You're not like most people we interview. No, I said. I'm a widow. But I'm also a witness. And I remember everything. I laid it all out. Every strange transaction. Every consulting trip that took Mark to unexpected cities. The locked drawers. The burner phone I once found in his glove compartment. At the time, I thought he was cheating. I never imagined he was deep cover. I felt guilty for suspecting the wrong crime. Martinez listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back. We've confirmed what Caroline found. Mark's documents were handed over to the agency years ago. He was feeding intel on laundering operations masked as corporate investments. Brooke's firm, we believe, became part of a second wave, opportunists trying to reuse his pipeline without the federal safety net. So when Jason and Brooke forged the will, they crossed the line from greed to organized fraud. And Diana? Her hands are dirtier than either of theirs. She's been laundering favors through political foundations for years. The arrest was just the beginning. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. Do you want to press for federal witness status? Martinez asked. It changes the game. Protection. Immunity. Your identity is sealed. Yes, I said. You'd be willing to testify? I nodded. In court. On camera. In front of every person who ever thought a woman with silver hair and soft hands couldn't burn down an empire. She handed me another form. I signed without hesitation. She paused. Would you wear a wire again? For who? Martinez's tone shifted. Jason wants to make a deal. My breath caught. What kind of deal? A private settlement. $3 million. The house stays yours. In exchange, you drop all charges. Publicly absolve him. I laughed. Did he really think money would fix this? She shrugged. People like him always do. I thought for a moment. I'll agree to meet. But I want to do it here. Controlled. Recorded. She agreed. 3 days later, the trap was set. The room looked like a corporate negotiation suite, leather chairs, glass walls, pitcher of water at the center. Cameras were hidden behind mirrored panels. I wore the wire again, buried under my scarf. Jason walked in first. Clean shave. New suit. Trying too hard. Brooke followed. Less makeup. Less presence. Hollow. Neither of them looked at me until the agent nodded that we could begin. Jason opened a black leather folder and slid it across the table. Here's the proposal. Clean $3 million. You keep the house. We all walk away. I didn't touch it. He tried to soften. Mom, this doesn't have to be forever. Families fight. They heal. I looked him in the eye. When did you find out about Dad's undercover work? Jason blinked. What? You knew he wasn't laundering, didn't you? You knew he was feeding intel to the feds. But you forged the will anyway. He didn't answer. Brooke shifted uncomfortably. You built a con on top of a federal sting, I said. Jason's mouth opened. Closed. That's not how he saw it. But that's what it was. The agent behind the glass tapped her pen twice. We had enough. I stood slowly. Your $3 million means nothing to me, I said. Because I don't need hush money. I have the truth. Brooke whispered, please. Think of the children. I replied. I'm thinking of the story they'll tell when they're old enough to ask why their parents were in handcuffs on the 6 o'clock news. I turned to leave. The agents entered. Jason's voice cracked. You're going to let this destroy us? I didn't turn back. You destroyed yourself. That night, I didn't cry. I sat in Mark's study and opened one of his journals. He had written the same phrase 4 times in different ink. Justice requires patience. But it doesn't wait forever. I lit a candle beside the book. The light danced across his handwriting. I whispered to the room, I'm doing it, Mark. Just like you wanted. The next day, the subpoenas rolled out. Diana's accounts were frozen. Brooke's law license was suspended. Jason's assets were officially seized. My freeze lifted. The bank called with an apology letter. They reinstated my accounts and updated my profile status to primary beneficiary, protected class. The manager personally walked me through the new security features. Later that week, I received another message. From Jason. Subject, please. Body. Mom. Everything's gone. They've taken it all. We didn't mean for it to go this far. Brooke's losing her license. Diana's been disowned by her own board. I'm under house arrest. I just want a chance to fix this. Please talk to me. Jason. I hit delete. Then I opened my brokerage app and made the move Jason never saw coming. That same week, exactly 7 days after he mocked me as too old to manage money, I bought a controlling stake in Harbor Ridge Robotics. The startup he had been pitching to venture capitalists. The one he called his future. The one he mocked me for not understanding. He strutted onto the stage at a tech summit, slides ready, grin wide. Then came the ownership breakdown slide. His face went slack. There it was. In bold white font. Eleanor Ward Holdings, 52%. The room murmured. Cameras zoomed in. His mouth opened, but no words came. He froze. I watched it all live. I sipped tea. I smiled. The pawn they dismissed had walked across the board and become the queen. And now the game was hers. The moment they cuffed Jason and Brooke in that federal negotiation room, the world didn't go quiet, it cracked. Subtle. Controlled. Like a sheet of ice groaning before it splits. They didn't cry. Not at first. Jason went still, the corners of his mouth twitching with disbelief. Brooke stiffened like she was posing for a mugsh asterisk T she intended to outlive. Jason Ward, Brooke Haysward, the agent recited, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit forgery, financial fraud, obstruction of justice, and attempted extortion of a federal witness. They didn't resist. They didn't shout. But their silence screamed. As they were let out, Jason said one last thing low, fast, and venomous. You don't understand, Mom. Dad worked with dangerous people. You've put yourself at risk. Agent Martinez turned, deadpan. Was that a threat to a federal witness? Jason's mouth snapped shut. She jotted something down. One more charge. Just like that. The hallway outside buzzed with agents and energy. I sat in the cold chair, hands folded, pulse steady. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I was watching everything like a woman finally seeing the entire stage of a play she didn't write but had been cast in against her will. Martinez returned 5 minutes later. "There's something else," she said. I blinked. "What now?" She handed me a sealed file. "We declassified this yesterday. You've earned the truth." Inside was a briefing. Government letterhead. Redactions in black bars. But one section was clear: Mark Ward, Operative ID number 73491, confidential financial liaison, embedded, long-term. I read every word twice. Mark had been a federal informant. 12 years. Quiet. Deep cover. His job wasn't to clean money. It was to follow it. He traced funds through dummy corporations and tax shelters, all while posing as a consultant and investor. And he documented everything: emails, ledgers, receipts. It was all real. And it was all sanctioned. "Everything you inherited is clean," Martinez said. "Every dollar." I stared at her. "Jason thought this would bury me." She nodded. "Instead, it proves Mark never stopped protecting you." I walked out of the building with the file tucked under my arm. I didn't need a car. I walked all the way home, through downtown streets filled with faces that didn't know what had just changed. The air was sharper. The sun brighter. The weight I'd been dragging for 8 months lifted so completely I almost forgot how heavy it had been. Back at the house, I lit a candle in Mark's study. Placed the federal file beneath his photo. Whispered, "I know now. I see you." I didn't cry. I smiled. By noon the next day, the ripples had reached national news. Seattle widow exposes inheritance fraud ring. Son, daughter-in-law indicted in federal elder abuse case. Legacy heist foiled by original beneficiary. Brooke's face, airbrushed and icy, was plastered on every screen. Jason's mugsh *T hair askew, eyes bludge *T was worse. The internet didn't waste time. Hashtags trended. Hashtag justice for Ellie. Hashtag forged by family. Hashtag trust is earned. Diana Hayes, once the queen of Westlake's social club, had gone silent. But not before sending one last, pitiful message. Subject, final offer. Body, let's be reasonable. You've won. The public loves you. But family doesn't have to end this way. I can still help you control the narrative. I know journalists. Politicians. You'd be surprised who owes me favors. I forwarded it to Martinez without a second thought. That same day, the DOJ froze Diana's charitable foundation for suspected financial misconduct. Another domino. Later that afternoon, I sat in the sunroom reviewing my brokerage accounts when I received a calendar invite. Harbor Ridge Robotics. Board meeting. I had voting power now. Majority stake. Jason's prize startup, his dream, his proof that he could outgrow his inheritance, was mine. I joined the meeting via Zoom. The board blinked when I appeared on screen. "Good morning," I said. "I'm Eleanor Ward. I'll be voting today." No one argued. Afterward, I sent an anonymous tip to a financial blog. Ask Jason Ward who owns his pitch deck now. The next day, the article went viral. The photos told the rest of the story. Jason standing frozen on stage, the screen behind him displaying Eleanor Ward Holdings, 52%. He looked like a man whose own mouth had betrayed him. That night, I walked through the house slowly. Every light was off except one, Mark's reading lamp in the study. I sat in his chair, opened his old ledger, and began making notes. Not about revenge. About rebuilding. Because victory without legacy is just noise. And I was building something that would outlive them all. The next morning, I opened a trust in my name, the Ellie Ward Foundation for Financial Abuse Survivors. It was quiet. No press release. No gala. Just a form, a wire transfer, and a note to Alan. Make it real. Make it strong. He called that afternoon. They'll write about this for years. Let them, I said. Let them see what happens when silence fights back. Letters came next. From Jason. From Brooke. Even from Diana's legal team. All pleading. All unopened. I kept them in a drawer. One day I'll burn them. The house is quiet now, but not empty. It breathes again. So do I. I sometimes play the video of that dinner, Jason saying I was too old to manage money. The laughter. The moment. The humiliation. I watch it without pain now. Because that moment birthed my rise. Because they thought I was fading. Instead, I was sharpening. And when I came back, I didn't ask for justice. I took it. By noon the next day, the court issued final rulings: asset forfeiture, trust revocation, injunctions. Jason's financial empire, every account, property, share, was now either frozen or reassigned. His inheritance was gone. Brooke's firm had disbarred her quietly in the night, without a hearing, just a 2-sentence email and a revocation certificate stamped in red. The silence that followed wasn't mercy. It was disgrace. The banks called me with rehearsed apologies. One sent a basket of flowers. Another offered me concierge-level account services with a hotline and a personal financial liaison. I declined the basket, accepted the concierge. I had nothing to prove, but everything to manage. One by one, Jason's financial lifelines dried up. Even his PayPal account was suspended. I knew because he emailed me to say so. Subject: "They're K*ling me, Mom." Message: "This was never about hurting you. I just thought I could do better. I thought Dad expected me to lead." I didn't reply. Instead, I called Alan and said, "Let's finalize the Harbor Ridge acquisition." He paused. "You're sure?" "Completely." That same week, Jason was scheduled to speak at a tech investor summit. He'd spent months preparing the pitch deck, the talking points, the story of how he rose from family legacy to innovative leadership. His image, his future, crafted meticulously to detach from the scandal. He thought the robotics company would be his redemption arc. I bought out the final tranche of shares 2 days before the summit. Quietly. Legally. Clean. The board approved it unanimously. I told no one. Not even Alan. Jason stood on stage in San Francisco, wearing his sharpest suit, eyes glinting with stage lights, opening line memorized to the syllable: "When legacy becomes innovation, we change the world." Then the first slide flicked on screen. Harbor Ridge Robotics. Ownership breakdown. Majority stake: Eleanor Ward Holdings, 52%. The room went silent. He blinked, then tried to smile, then faltered. He turned, visibly confused, at the screen behind him. His fingers fumbled for the remote. His throat moved, but no sound came. The moderators cut to intermission. That clip went viral. 16 million views in 24 hours. Some said it was tech's most poetic rug pull. I didn't comment. But I watched it 10 times. I watched his face collapse in real time. And I didn't flinch once. That night, Brooke sent a final message. No subject. Just 4 words: "What do you want?" I forwarded it to Agent Martinez. She laughed. "Tell her we want honesty," she said. "And we know she's incapable of it." I didn't reply to Brooke either. Not because I had nothing to say, but because they had lost the right to hear my voice. Instead, I turned to what mattered. The house. Mark's study, finally emptied of ledgers and legal files, became something new: a bright, airy art studio. I painted the first stroke across a blank canvas the day Jason's company stock dipped below 20 cents. I played jazz. I opened the windows. I lit lavender candles. And I started over. Then I created the Ellie Ward Trust, a legal defense fund for seniors targeted by their own families. I poured in the first million from Harbor Ridge dividends. I named it not in pride, but in proof. Proof that legacy, when protected, could become power. Reporters called it poetic justice. I called it overdue. Letters from Jason came weekly now. Apologies. Rambling. Promises. Questions. What did Dad really say about me? Did you ever love me more than you feared me? Can I see the kids? I didn't open them. I stored them in a box labeled regret, filed but unread. I knew eventually the grandchildren would grow. And when they did, they'd ask questions. They'd read articles. They'd find out what their parents did. And I wouldn't hide it. But I'd let them decide who they wanted to be. Not Jason. Not Brooke. Themselves. One evening, I sat on the porch watching a thunderstorm roll in across the lake. I held a glass of wine and the remote in the other. I replayed the video of that dinner. The moment Jason rose and said, "Mom, you're too old to handle money." The laughter. The phones in the air. The click of Brooke's bracelet as she slid brochures across the table. I remembered how that moment split time, before and after, love and legacy, mother and target. But now? I watched it like a documentary about a woman who used to be me. The humiliation that broke me became the hinge on which everything turned. That moment made me dangerous. That moment made me visible. And I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because he gave me the ending of my book in a single sentence. You're too old to handle money. Too old. I built a trust from the ground up. Too old. I bought a robotics company while you begged your lawyer for bail. Too old. I outplayed you in silence while you screamed into cameras. Age isn't the limit. Underestimation is. They tried to write me out like a soft epilogue. But I became the plot twist. The pawn they dismissed walked all the way back across the board and became the queen. Not loud. Not vengeful. Just decisive. Calm. And unstoppable. 6 months later, sunlight poured through the new skylights in my house on Westlake Avenue, my house. The walls, once muted beige, were now painted in clean shades of ivory and pale blue. The old kitchen tiles had been replaced with warm wood. Every corner bore my touch, not Mark's, not Jason's, not Brooke's. Mine. The master bedroom no longer held echoes of betrayal. It smelled of eucalyptus and sea salt. I had new sheets. A new mattress. A new bed. Not because I wanted to erase Mark, but because I had finally decided I deserved comfort that didn't carry memories. Mark's study had become my art studio. The shelves once lined with legal binders and corporate ledgers now held jars of paint, brushes in hand-thrown mugs, canvases leaning like secrets waiting to be told. I painted every morning, sunlight spilling over unfinished skies, strokes layered over pain. Not to forget. To claim it. Jason and Brooke were serving short sentences after their plea deals. The court had made it clear, full convictions would have guaranteed prison. Their lawyers begged for mercy, citing children and reputations. I didn't argue. I just requested the terms. No contact. Ever. No letters. No visits. No more lies. They agreed. Jason still tried. Letters slipped through lawyers. Digital messages sent through masked emails. Always the same tone, apology wrapped in self-pity, guilt disguised as love. I didn't know how far I was falling. I was trying to protect the legacy. I thought I was stronger than Dad, but I became weaker than both of you. I stopped reading after the third one. There's a moment when a mother stops hoping. It isn't sudden. It's quiet. Like rain that never ends, it stops being dramatic. It just becomes weather. You live around it. I launched the Ellie Ward Trust officially in January. It was modest at first, 2 attorneys, 1 office, a mission. Provide legal defense to elders targeted by family for financial abuse. I didn't want it to be a symbol. I wanted it to be a P*N. The first case we took was a woman from Tacoma. Her son had tricked her into co-signing a loan and then defaulted, nearly bankrupting her. We won the case in 3 weeks. The second case was worse. A daughter-in-law had stolen over $80,000, masked as medical reimbursements. We froze her accounts. Recovered $72,000. We sent the woman a bouquet with a card that read, "You're not alone anymore." Media outlets started calling again. Can we interview you? Can we feature your story in a documentary? Can you come to speak at our summit on elder rights? I said yes to one. A quiet podcast. No cameras. Just a microphone, a producer, and a warm cup of tea. What would you say, the host asked, to women listening right now who feel erased? I paused. Then I said, "You're not too late. You're not too old. You're just getting started." She cried after we finished recording. Said her own mother was going through something similar. "I wish she were more like you," she whispered. I shook my head gently. She already is. She just needs someone to remind her. I never mentioned Jason or Brooke by name. Not because I was protecting them, but because they didn't deserve to be the ending of my story. Mark's memory lived differently now. After the truth came out that he had been deep cover, working for the government to dismantle laundering networks. There were headlines. Brief recognition. The agency sent a letter of commendation. No ceremony. Just a thick envelope and a badge number I wasn't allowed to show. But I knew. I framed the letter and placed it on the mantel, beside his photo. Sometimes I talk to him. Not as a ghost. Just as someone who understands. You tried to protect me in your way, I told him one night. I did the rest in mine. I still go to the garden every morning. The rosemary has grown wild, untamed, stubborn. I let it be. The tomato plants are gone, replaced by lavender and sage. I grow what heals now, not what feeds others. Daniel, my grandson, writes me letters. He's 8 now. In one, he wrote, "Grandma Ellie, when I grow up, I want to be strong like you." I put that letter in a frame. The court ordered supervised visitation for the children. Brooke's parents tried to intervene. They failed. I don't poison the children with stories. I just answer questions simply. Why don't we live with mommy anymore? Because sometimes adults make choices that are not safe. Is daddy coming back soon? Not today. Maybe not for a long time. Do you still love them? I loved who I thought they were. That's enough. People ask if I feel free now. Freedom is a complicated thing. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes quietly, like sleeping through the night for the first time in months. Like seeing a number you once feared on your phone screen and feeling nothing. Like paying for your own groceries without flinching, even though you're more than wealthy. Freedom is not absence. It's presence. One day, I drove to the courthouse alone. Parked. Sat in the lot for 10 minutes. Then walked inside and requested a printed copy of the full case file. The clerk looked confused. Most people don't want to see this again. I'm not most people, I said. She handed me the stack. I brought it home. Filed it in a box labeled Clarity, and placed it on the top shelf of the hall closet. That night, I sat at the kitchen table. I poured one glass of wine. I opened a new canvas. I painted the ocean not calm, but roaring. Because that's who I am now. The storm they tried to survive. The final line of their forged script. The unwritten chapter they never saw coming. And when I walk through my house now, barefoot, paint on my fingers, tea in hand, I don't think about revenge. I think about how quiet justice feels. It doesn't shout. It whispers, my life. My terms. And this time, no one else gets a vote.